I'm back. Mr. Clark's back. Time to take a look at topics 11.4, 11.5, and 6. We're going to do all three together as there are only about 20 questions in total. So I'll just do one recorded lesson for these last three sections as there's not too many questions on each of these sections. Keep in mind you've learned quite a bit about European colonies in North America previously, so I didn't feel the need to spend a tremendous amount of time on this. You'll also be taking a look at this from an American perspective in a little more detail as you move into US 1 next year. So some of the key objectives here, at least for 11.4, and we'll have them on the activity sheet there for you to kind of fill out and broken down by the individual sections. So looking at 11.4, European colonies in North America, we're going to explain why the colony of New France grew slowly. We're going to analyze the establishment and the growth of English colonies and understand why Europeans competed for power in North America and how their struggle would impact Native Americans. You're looking at New France or France. We'll be taking a look here at the different regions. You can see in the green are the English, and the purple are the French, and then the orange color would be the Spanish. They each controlled different parts of North America. The colonies differed greatly from each other in terms of their governance and even what the different climates had in regard to what could be obtained from these colonies or what wealth or profit. One, where did France establish a colony in North America in 1608? Where we see it's in Canada, what is modern day Quebec, Canada. Two, how did settlers trying to make money in the harsh climate of North America, in particular in the Canadian region? A lot of the early wealth, especially for New France, was through fur trapping or furs, and then, of course, trading. Three, as we move into the 13 English colonies, what were the first two permanent settlements in North America by the English? And hopefully you know this from elementary school or middle school. You have Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, and Plymouth Rock or Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. The image on the screen is from Jamestown, which was located in a prime location situated near the Atlantic Ocean and had port for ships to dock. And also, the James River will provide fresh water, fish, and a route to the interior. Four, why did many English settlers risk coming to North America in the early 1600s? And again, it's the wealth idea, the idea of a new life, new opportunity, land. A lot of people who were kind of stuck in the middle or lower classes within society had very little hope in Great Britain to have their own land. So they had a fresh opportunity here. So you had religious freedom as well. You had the Pilgrims and Puritans who had left England because of religious freedom or they wanted to purify their own church. They also wanted, obviously, to make money or a profit, own their own land, and, of course, the excitement of a new life and opportunity in the new world. Five, how did the colonists make a living and survive? So look at the three different regions of the American colonies. You have the New England colonies in the northeastern section, the middle colonies in the central section, and then the southern section would be the southern colonies. So the New England colonies, this includes New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Then in the middle colonies, we have our own New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware. And then in the southern colonies, you have Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. So you had 4, 4, and 5 in regard to the number of colonies. In the New England colonies, fishing, timber, and trade were the primary means of profit. The middle colonies had farming, grains, and trade. And then the southern colonies were fortunate enough to farm basically year round, and they sold a lot of the cash crops, your tobacco, your indigo, and cotton. Now, the French and the British were naturally irritating each other throughout history. It wouldn't be until contemporary times where they would kind of work together. So the French and the British, they went to war in 1754, and it was called the French and Indian War. It's basically the French and their Indian or Native American allies, and the British, their Native American allies, as well as the American colonists. And you can see there the different claims that they had over the course of different periods of time there. in 1750 and how it would change after the French and Indian War in regard to the number of territory controlled. So naturally, the French and the British are natural rivals competing for world power, and they both claim territory in the Ohio Valley. You can see the French claims shrink significantly from 1750 to 1763, especially in that Ohio River Valley. 7. How did the Treaty of Paris set the terms for ending the French and Indian War? Britain won almost all of France's territory in North America, and Great Britain emerged as the world's most powerful country as a result of this victory. And we'll move on to 11.5 in a moment. Eleven point five: the slave trade and its impact on Africa. So then the key objectives we move into 11.5. Look at the expansion of the African slave trade. This is directly related to the 13 colonies in North America. We'll explain how the triangular trade worked. We'll understand the nature of the Middle Passage and describe its effects. And we'll analyze the impact of the Atlantic slave trade on West Africa, the native African people, as well as the Americas. 1. How do you think exploration and colonization led to the slave trade in Africa? Europeans exploring trade routes established forts along the African coast. Colonies in the Americas needed massive amounts of labor. They had too much land and not enough people to work it. Europe's access to Africa and need for workers set the stage, unfortunately, for this period of time, this disturbing period of time of slavery in America. You can almost see the triangle that's kind of formed here between basically Africa and Europe, the Americas, and the Caribbean. 2. How did the triangular trade work? And you can see the different things here. It's kind of small on your screen. You can see the different directions that the different groups would go. So the slaves are going into the Americas. Manufactured goods go into Great Britain and Europe. And then you also have a lot of different things, molasses, cotton, different products going back and forth. So European ships would bring goods to Africa. They would exchange them with the African, sometimes tribal leaders who sold their own people into slavery. Slaves would be shipped from the Americas along the Middle Passage, exchanged for sugar, molasses, and other products. These products would be then shipped back to Europe. 3. How did the slave trade impact the colonial economies? Unfortunately, it was very profitable. Imperial nations made huge profits from the slave trade. Colonies expanded as they produced ships, cotton, and tobacco. There were horrors along the way, especially obviously for the slaves. So 4, explain the process and horrors endured during the Middle Passage. Slaves are rounded up from the African interior, often march hundreds of miles in chains. They were put into holding pens until they were put onto a ship. On the ship, they were crammed into the ship, held down by chains for weeks and months on end. Many died along the Middle Passage of disease, cruelty, and resistance. And if you look at the image here, it's kind of a image that kind of shows how crowded it was for the slaves on board the ship during the Middle Passage, basically sleeping on top of each other. And of course, you have filth, feces, and disease spreading rapidly amongst these malnourished people. 5, how many Africans were taken into slavery during this period of time? Some 11 million Africans were sold into slavery, of which about 2 million died along the Middle Passage. So roughly about 18% of the 11 million who went along the Middle Passage died before reaching their destination. 6, how did the slave trade impact Africa? This led to wars and turmoil among African tribes, oppression and colonization by European powers. Okay, and the lesson reflection for this particular section here explain the long-term impact of the Middle Passage and slavery on America. Obviously, distrust and resentment between African Americans and leadership in the country, an uncomfortable feeling of racism and prejudice that still exists, and systemic racism obviously is still something that is being addressed finally in contemporary society, and something that hundreds of years after this slave trade began, we're still dealing with issues of prejudice, racism, and other issues within society. Okay, next we'll move into 11.6. The effects of global contact. So this is basically the long-term impact of colonization on society. We'll kind of tie together everything we've discussed so far in topic 11. Some of the key objectives here. We'll explain how European exploration led to the Columbian Exchange. We'll explain new economic factors and principles that contributed to the success of the commercial revolution. And we'll understand the impact of mercantilism on European and colonial economies. So first, we'll look at the Columbian Exchange. As Columbus and more Europeans arrived in the Americas, what were the new foods? What were new foods were these regions being exposed to? I think we have a bonus word there. What new foods were these regions being exposed to? There's a little correction for us. In Europe, tomatoes and pumpkins and potatoes and peppers. In America, we had wheat, grapes, banana, cattle, and horses. Two, how did the Columbian Exchange impact both Europe and the Americas? In Europe, the new foods helped contribute to a population explosion. In the Americas, natives used horses and weapons to hunt more efficiently. Millions of people migrated from Europe to the Americas, exchanging ideas and culture. You can see a little bit too there with the map. Kind of shows you a little bit of the movement of the different food products from one continent to the other. And this also helped to contribute to the commercial revolution. Three, what was the commercial revolution? Europe underwent massive economic growth, which led to capitalism and free enterprise system. In a free enterprise system, obviously entrepreneurs and businesses are free to make as much profit as possible. Businesses, of course, privately owned. They expand, make decisions based on their own financial profits. Decisions are based usually on supply and demand. Supply, how much product is available. Demand, how much people want and are willing to pay for it. So supply and demand are how you kind of see prices. If the supply is really high and the demand is really low, the price will go down. Conversely, if the supply is low, demand high, then the price will go up accordingly. So price is determined by the two factors of supply and demand. Gas prices, the availability of oil and things like that is one of the things you see on a regular basis, just as you're driving around with your family. You might see the gas prices going up and down on the gas station signs there. And so if they're on an upward swing, that means that the demand for oil and gas is high and the supply is not meeting that demand or low. And conversely, let's say during the winter when there's less traveling going on and things like that, supply might be a little bit higher and the demand a little bit lower, and prices may just naturally come down. You see the imagery here during the commercial revolution. Prague In Prague, the stock exchange was a busy center of investment and activity. It's the capital of the Holy Roman Empire in the late 1500s. Next, we'll move into mercantilism. How did the practice of mercantilism attempt to make nations more powerful? Countries tried to increase its supply of gold and silver. They established colonies to acquire more natural resources. Natural resources turned into finished products to be sold. Tariffs and taxes imposed to generate wealth for the government. Six, how to increase economic activity impact European society. Strong national governments emerged to protect economic interest. We also had the development of social classes, those who were emerging with wealth and some who were kind of being left behind. And we also saw the development of cities during this period of time in history. Okay, and finally, the lesson reflection. What are the long term effects of international trade, in particular between different continents? And a lot of it is diversification. More diverse fruits, vegetables, raw materials, species of animals, and other items became more available around the world. It promoted international trade and globalization. Today has linked together the entire world. When you think about the e-commerce today, you can pretty much today, if you want to start your own business and establish an online site, you can pretty much sell any product that you're able to create, or an invention, or an idea, or a technology. Cooperations in other areas like health issues, vaccines, etc. Military alliances, which obviously can be both positive and negative. So hopefully you enjoyed our discussion as we kind of went through these sections here at 11, 4, 5, and 6. And until next time, Mr. Clarke is out.